Initially, palace spokespeople tried to shrug off the high-level meeting as just another routine constitutional briefing, the exact kind that quietly goes down behind palace walls every few months. But, according to whispers spreading among seasoned royal reporters and former household staff, this gathering was anything but normal. The vibe surrounding Clarence House that afternoon was thick with a level of tension rarely seen even during times of major national crisis. Security protocols were reportedly ramped up without any official explanation. Some staff members were told to leave the building through side exits. Internal memos were allegedly banned in favour of face-to-face talks, an almost unprecedented step inside the modern royal household. And perhaps most revealing of all top constitutional advisers were spotted slipping inside through private back entrances normally, kept for urgent matters like succession planning or emergency regency talks. That detail alone was enough to trigger massive alarm across royal circles, because within the House of Windsor, there are only a few situations serious enough to demand that extreme level of secrecy, and every single one of them directly threatens the survival of the crown itself. According to sources familiar with these closed-door talks, Prince William was urgently summoned by King Charles after a chain of highly sensitive conversations about who will hold the future structure of royal authority. King Charles, already physically drained after months of intense cancer treatments, was reportedly facing intense pressure from battling rival factions inside the palace walls. Some felt the British monarchy desperately needed stronger backup plans as worries over the king's health continued to mount. Others feared that even talking about such scenarios openly might trigger widespread public panic and destabilise the royal family at the worst possible moment. But somewhere during those tense debates, reports suggest a controversial proposal surfaced that instantly shocked Prince William the second it was brought up. And Queen Camilla's reported involvement only made things worse. Sources close to the royal administrative staff claimed the Queen was right there during crucial parts of these private discussions, which reportedly caught William completely off guard. Various accounts of the meeting describe an atmosphere that quickly devolved from quiet talks into a heated disagreement between father and son. While no official details have been confirmed, whispers within royal media circles suggest the main clash centred on the future balance of power if King Charles's medical condition takes a sudden turn for the worse. Specifically, rumours started swirling about major changes involving councillors of state and regency, powers those ancient rules buried deep inside Britain's constitutional system that decide who actually runs the monarchy during a period of illness. To the public, these legal rules are almost completely invisible, but behind closed doors they represent the literal engine of royal survival, and according to several palace insiders, Prince William allegedly saw parts of this plan as extremely dangerous territory. Over the next few days, royal reporters started noticing subtle but unmistakable signs that something major had shifted. Prince William and King Charles seemed unusually cold and distant during official events. Quick interactions between the two men reportedly felt frozen brief and heavily staged. Media experts who had tracked the family for decades quietly whispered that something was wrong. Even veteran palace staff figures known for protecting royal family secrets at all costs, who usually go to extreme lengths to shield the monarchy from any outside drama, allegedly started leaking worries about instability at the very top of the institution. Then came the moment that truly blew this scandal wide open. Late that night, William was spotted storming out of Clarence House long after most top aides had gone home. Witnesses said the future king looked incredibly angry, clutching documents suspected to contain private constitutional briefing files. Hours later, insiders claimed emergency crisis talks were already being set up between William, Princess Anne, and several of their most trusted royal advisers. Whatever went down in that secret meeting, it was no longer just a small family dispute. It was quickly turning into something much more dangerous, a bitter battle over the ultimate direction of the crown itself. Because what really terrified William wasn't just the secrecy, it was realising the monarchy's oldest rules were being rewritten behind closed doors. As King Charles battled through gruelling cancer treatments throughout 2025, the machinery around him began quietly, getting ready for worst-case scenarios the public was never supposed to know about. In royal history, times of weakness always create space for raw ambition and silent power. Struggles? Behind the polished press releases put out by Buckingham Palace, reports suggest the heavy physical toll on the king was becoming impossible to hide within inner circles. Public gigs were cut short. Private agendas were rescheduled at the very last second. Audiences once managed directly by Charles were handed off to senior aides or quietly passed over to Prince William. To the public it looked like a responsible king delegating royal duties while focusing on his health. But inside the palace, according to those close to the action, a much more fragile reality was starting to surface. Palace courtiers were no longer debating if quick temporary adjustments might be needed. They were actively arguing about how the entire crown would function if the king's medical status took a sudden nosedive. That debate alone carried massive constitutional danger because the British throne survives not just on empty ceremony but on total stability. That is its ultimate weapon. And once doubts start creeping in about who actually holds real power behind the scenes, the royal house enters highly dangerous territory. According to palace sources, Prince William was pushed right into the middle of royal operations during this crisis. Officially, it was spun as training for his future role. Unofficially, insiders believed it was a silent emergency transition in slow motion. William took over major duties, including foreign diplomatic events, high-level strategy meetings and daily operations between the royal households. Senior palace officials allegedly started treating him less like a mere heir and more like a stabilizing leader, quietly preparing to take the crown before anyone was ready to publicly talk about it. But this power shift triggered massive tension inside the palace. While several old-school traditionalists believed William needed real authority, immediately other royal advisers feared giving him too much spotlight too early might send a message of panic to the public. The crown has always relied on the illusion of stability. Looking immortal matters almost, as much as actually being stable. And according to royal sources, there were serious fears that any public sidelining of King Charles could spark a massive constitutional crisis the palace just could not contain. Heavy questions about Regency powers, councillors of state and secret succession plans suddenly stopped being theoretical debates. They became harsh, urgent realities. Simultaneously, whispers about Queen Camilla's growing grip on power reportedly exploded. Sources close to the royal household claimed that Camilla had become one of the king's ultimate gatekeepers during his medical recovery, deeply involved in managing his scheduled visitor access and major daily decision-making. Some loyalists saw her presence as pure, loving support for a sick husband, guiding his kingdom through a brutal chapter of his reign. Others, however, feared the balance of power inside behind closed doors. The palace was beginning to shift in ways the public was never meant to notice. In an institution built on centuries of rigid hierarchy, even minor changes in access carry massive weight. It threatened explosive consequences. Soon, comparisons to earlier royal crises became impossible to ignore. Historians and palace commentators began quietly drawing parallel lines to past regencies that once shook the crown. These crises had shaken the monarchy during moments of royal illness, but the deeper fear was not simply about King Charles and his health. It was about what prolonged uncertainty could unleash inside the institution. History has shown that when monarchs weaken, factions emerge, alliances form, and behind the official language of duty and tradition, fierce battles over future power often begin long before the public realises what is happening. By late 2025, insiders claimed senior courtiers had effectively split into two competing camps. One side reportedly argued that Prince William needed immediate and greater operational control to preserve long-term stability. The other side believed such moves risked overshadowing Charles, while he was still king, potentially creating the dangerous appearance of a divided monarchy during a delicate period. This threatened to disrupt one of the most delicate periods in modern royal history, and caught right between those competing visions stood King Charles himself, exhausted and increasingly pressured. He was physically diminished and pressured by those closest to him. But while the palace framed everything as routine planning, William reportedly discovered that one proposal went too far. According to whispers circulating among top royal correspondents, a confidential plan was drafted that would quietly expand Queen Camilla's ceremonial and constitutional role during any future major royal transition. It was a bold move that William allegedly viewed as crossing an unforgivable line. At first, this controversial proposal was spoken about only in fragments and vague whispered references. These details were buried inside private conversations, half-finished sentences exchanged in secured corridors, and very carefully worded discussions about continuity and balance. But as more shocking details allegedly surfaced within senior royal circles, the true scale of what was being actively considered began sending massive shockwaves right through the entire palace. According to multiple key insiders, this was no longer simply about helping an ailing monarch manage temporary duties. Reports suggest the heated discussions actually involved granting Camilla enhanced power. They discussed granting Camilla an enhanced level of ceremonial influence during a potential regency, a move some feared would place unprecedented authority near the very centre of constitutional power. For Prince William, that reportedly changed absolutely everything. Sources familiar with the situation claim the future king viewed the proposal as an extraordinarily dangerous and reckless gamble. It was a dangerous gamble at the worst possible moment. The monarchy was already navigating growing public anxiety surrounding King Charles's health when trust in the institution was fragile. That trust depended heavily on stability restraint and strict adherence to precedent. But, according to whispers from palace administrative circles, portions of the plan went further. Certain sections appeared to explore Regency legislation in ways some insiders believed stretched dangerously beyond tradition. The deeper concern, according to those close to Prince William, was public perception. While legal advisers may debate technical constitutional mechanisms behind closed doors, the public sees something far simpler: who has the power, the influence, and the ultimate royal control. William allegedly feared that even the slight appearance of unelected influence surrounding succession matters could ignite a devastating public backlash against the monarchy itself. This was especially true during a delicate period where public trust was already being tested by illness and growing media speculation. For generations, the Crown survived by staying neutral. They maintained one sacred principle above all others: the institution must always appear bigger than the individuals inside it. But insiders claim Prince William became increasingly and deeply worried. He was convinced that the lines separating supportive ceremonial duties from actual political influence were beginning to blur in ways that could permanently damage the very delicate balance of the crown. What made this situation even more volatile was the growing divide among the palace advisers. according to royal correspondence tracking the internal tensions factions had quietly formed. One side reportedly argued that expanding Queen Camilla's visibility and operational role would reassure the public by presenting a clear sense of continuity around King Charles during his illness. They allegedly framed the proposal as a practical safeguard designed to protect institutional stability during what was becoming an incredibly unpredictable chapter for the entire British monarchy. Supporters believed the institution needed experienced figures to maintain operational cohesion if Charles became temporarily unable to fulfill key duties. But others viewed this with deep alarm. Some feared the proposal risked creating the impression of a shadow monarchy operating beside the official line of succession. Others warned that expanding her footprint was highly dangerous. They warned that expanding Camilla's constitutional footprint could provoke a backlash, not only from the public but from deep within the royal family itself, despite years of careful management. Following the controversies of the Diana era, there remained deep sensitivities surrounding Camilla's actual place within the institution. And according to insiders, William understood those sensitivities very well. William understood those complex sensitivities better than anyone. That realization pushed him into action. Sources claim the Prince of Wales began privately consulting the two figures he trusted most. He trusted Princess Anne and Prince Edward with the monarchy's long-term survival. Unlike many modern royal figures, Anne and Edward had spent decades operating within the strict royal machinery. They worked without ever seeking personal spotlight or influence. Their loyalty, insiders say, was always to the institution first, and according to palace whispers, William valued this loyalty greatly. William increasingly viewed them as essential allies in what was rapidly becoming a battle over the future of the crown itself. Behind closed doors, these private discussions rapidly intensified. Legal interpretations were heavily scrutinized while historical precedents were quietly revisited. Royal advisers began examining old Regency crises from previous centuries. They searched for guidance buried inside Britain's constitutional history. But beneath all the legal language and institutional caution, a far more emotional and personal conflict was emerging. This conflict cut directly through the very heart of the royal family. Because for William, this was no longer simply about protocol, it was about protecting the royal future. He wanted to protect the future reign of Prince George. He sought to protect public trust in the monarchy, guarding the fragile line, separating royal duty from personal influence. According to those closest to the situation, that was the exact moment everything inside the palace began to shift permanently. The future king reportedly stopped acting like a son and started acting like the ultimate protector. He was now acting as the protector of the crown. Insiders claim William's response was immediate, icy, and deeply personal. Behind the polished smiles, a constitutional battle was brewing. A major counteroffensive was quietly taking shape inside Kensington Palace. What had begun as simple private concern was now hardening into pure determination, according to sources familiar with the tension. With tensions rising inside the royal household, William no longer viewed the situation as a temporary disagreement over protocol. He reportedly believed the monarchy itself faced a critical choice. The institution was approaching a dangerous crossroads, one where centuries of carefully preserved constitutional distance risked being compromised by internal ambition and competing loyalties. There were quiet attempts to redefine influence around the throne. Once that realization settled in, insiders claim the future king began moving with a level of extreme strategic precision. This precision startled even senior palace figures. At the very centre of William's response was an alliance that formed rapidly behind closed doors, with Princess Anne long regarded as the anchor. The monarchy's most disciplined guardian reportedly became one of Prince William's key allies during this time. Prince Edward highly respected for his quiet loyalty and deep grasp of royal tradition, was reportedly drawn into top-secret talks regarding emergency succession plans and keeping the day-to-day operations running smoothly. Together, if palace rumours are true, they led a faction fiercely dedicated to a single goal, shielding the royal crown from getting dragged into messy personal power plays, during a time of massive uncertainty for the nation. For Prince William, this rule was absolutely non-negotiable. Reports reveal that a wave of secret legal meetings quickly took place inside Kensington Palace. Legal scholars, former aides and top lawyers were quietly summoned for urgent talks to analyse the precise limits of Regency rule, who holds real power and emergency backup plans. Though none of these meetings were ever officially confirmed, palace insiders claim the mood behind closed doors was incredibly tense. Prince William reportedly demanded absolute clarity on every single rule to block what he saw as a dangerous power vacuum while King Charles was dealing with his serious illness. But below the surface, a much bigger storm was brewing. According to several royal experts, a new strategy was taking shape inside William's camp, a secret plan that aides quietly called the Heir's Accord. This strategy, sources say, aimed to protect the royal family's future survival by making sure any handover of power followed strict historic rules rather than backroom deals and unofficial networks. Those loyal to William reportedly felt the royal family could survive massive scandals, heavy criticism and deep public anger, but it could never survive, losing its crucial reputation for political neutrality. That deep anxiety reportedly drove every single move William made. Insiders working deep within the palace walls claim the Prince of Wales grew incredibly firm behind closed doors, constantly repeating that the royal family must stay completely neutral and strictly disciplined no matter the drama happening between family members. According to whispers from top palace aides, William warned that letting boundaries blur during a potential Regency crisis would cause permanent damage not just to King Charles's legacy, but to Prince George's future throne and the generations that follow. Naturally, the mood in these meetings grew, incredibly tense. Multiple sources state that William's face-to-face talks with several of King Charles's oldest, most trusted advisors turned highly dramatic behind the scenes. Some old-school courtiers reportedly felt William was overstepping his bounds and causing unnecessary drama, while his father, the king, was still actively on the throne. Yet others secretly backed him up, warning that the royal household was already heading down a very dangerous path by even considering these backdoor power-sharing proposals. And through all of this intense drama, reports show Kate Middleton stood fiercely by her husband. While she stayed far away from official political debates in public, sources say the Princess of Wales fully backed William's tough approach to protecting the crown's future. Those who know the couple's private thoughts say Kate was highly sensitive to how fragile the royal family had become after years of relentless scandals, family drama, and declining public trust. Whispers suggest she completely agreed with William that they could not risk another disaster where private family favours seemed to override strict constitutional rules. By this point, the growing civil war inside the palace was impossible to hide, with rival factions drawing battle lines over the monarchy's future. One group pushed for flexibility, saying they needed to build a larger, unofficial backup team around King Charles during his treatment. Meanwhile, the other side argued any shift away from traditional rules was a massive risk that could trigger a royal crisis. But as William dug deeper, he realised this wasn't just a fight about Queen Camilla. This was about who controls Buckingham Palace for the next decade. For years, Camilla had built up a quiet, highly influential network behind the scenes. Now, multiple sources claim William felt that network was starting to grab real power. To the public, Queen Camilla's rise inside the family seemed slow, steady, and very highly organised. After surviving decades of intense public scandal over her romance with King Charles, she successfully rebuilt her image through patience and very careful PR. Palace PR teams always painted her as a deeply loyal partner to the king, someone completely dependable through the royal family's most dramatic and painful years. But behind that glossy royal exterior, serious rumours had been swirling for months about a major power shift happening inside the day-to-day running of the palace. According to sources close to the royal household, several of Camilla's personal aides had slowly secured highly influential strategic positions throughout key departments of palace operations. Access routes to King Charles were allegedly starting to shift. Daily administrative control, scheduling authority, and key advisory proximity. On their own, these shifts seemed tiny, but put them together and they pointed to a clear, coordinated agenda that worried traditional royal courtiers. They feared a second parallel network was quietly taking over, operating dangerously close to the absolute centre of royal authority. This scenario deeply worried Prince William. Sources close to Kensington Palace reveal the Prince of Wales grew deeply concerned that strict constitutional lines were being blurred behind the scenes during his father's battle with cancer. Whispers suggest William feared the royal family was heading toward a state where unelected figures had the final say in daily decisions run by strict royal hierarchy. For generations, the survival of the British crown rested on one crucial, unbreakable rule. Private family ties could never interfere with the official line of succession and crown authority. But sources suggest that boundary line was starting to vanish. This anxiety grew even worse as the spotlight turned to the wider Parker Bowles family. Although there is no public proof of any official meddling, from Camilla's relatives, intense rumours in the media have deeply worried royal traditionalists who were already stressed about the shifting power balance around the king. Many feared that allowing backroom networks to operate while King Charles was vulnerable would lead to what palace aides privately called a fractured, a dangerous setup where rival factions battle for control inside the palace. In the dark history of the royal family, that phrase has chilling echoes. Experienced royal experts began comparing this drama to the most chaotic eras of British history, when sick rulers were surrounded by competing households and rival advisors battling for power behind closed doors. The real fear, according to sources, was not about who liked whom, it was about protecting the absolute rules of who is in charge. Because once the public believes royal decisions are made by secret networks instead of official laws, trust in the royal institution itself was starting to fracture. Prince William reportedly understood this danger much better than anyone. Having spent his whole life preparing for the Crown's sources claim he viewed public perception not as a secondary concern but as the monarchy's actual lifeblood. And according to those familiar with his thinking, he allegedly feared that if these internal family tensions ever leaked openly into the public view, the consequences would be absolutely catastrophic. This monarchy had already endured years of massive scandal, deep division, and relentless press scrutiny following the highly publicised departures of Prince Harry and Meghan, the controversies surrounding Prince Andrew, and growing Republican sentiments among the younger generations. Another visible internal power struggle right at the very top of the royal institution could easily shatter the carefully rebuilt image of unity King Charles had worked so desperately to preserve since ascending the throne. And caught directly in the very centre of that storm stood the king himself. Insider reports suggest Charles became increasingly torn between two completely different worlds that were slowly colliding around him. On one side was Camilla, the woman who had remained right beside him through long decades of harsh criticism, media scandal and public hostility before finally becoming queen. On the other side stood William, the future of the monarchy, the next sovereign and the figure many, inside the royal institution already viewed as their true long-term survival strategy. According to close palace insiders, Charles allegedly understood the risks raised by William, yet struggled deeply emotionally with the painful idea that protecting the crown might require limiting the influence of the person closest to him. This intense emotional conflict reportedly deepened tensions behind closed doors. Meetings quickly became much colder. Trust began eroding between the rival camps. Senior advisers allegedly found themselves forced to choose sides very carefully as competing visions for the monarchy's future hardened inside the palace walls. And by this stage, royal insiders claim everyone around the king understood one terrifying reality. The conflict was no longer quietly fading away. It was building directly towards something completely unavoidable. And as the intense pressure mounted behind palace walls, one final confrontation reportedly forced King Charles into an impossible decision. The decisive moment reportedly came during a highly private gathering at Sandringham, a tense family summit, where decades of loyalty, deep resentment, and royal duty finally collided face to face. According to multiple royal insiders, the tense atmosphere surrounding this meeting was unlike anything senior household staff had witnessed since the final years of Queen Elizabeth's long reign. Sandringham had always served as far more than just a royal estate. For generations it functioned as a neutral ground during moments of family crisis, a place where disputes too sensitive for Buckingham Palace were handled privately behind closed doors, far away from ministers' cameras and public scrutiny. But this gathering reportedly carried a very different weight, because by the time Prince William arrived, the quiet, constitutional anxieties that had been building for months had transformed into a direct confrontation over the future shape of the British monarchy itself. Sources familiar with the discussions claim William no longer approached this situation cautiously. The uncertainty surrounding King Charles's health, the growing tensions inside palace operations, and the expanding fears over blurred constitutional influence had reportedly pushed the Prince of Wales way beyond simple private concern. Insiders allege that during the meeting, William directly confronted the king over the serious risks posed by the proposals circulating among certain palace advisers. It was no longer framed as a mere disagreement over ceremonial adjustments or temporary contingency plans. According to whispers from those close to the family, William allegedly warned his father that the royal institution itself was drifting toward dangerous territory, and this time he reportedly refused to soften his position at all. Princess Anne, long regarded as the monarchy's most uncompromising defender, was also said to have played a highly critical role during the discussions. Sources claim Princess Anne strongly supported the absolute need for clear institutional safeguards surrounding succession authority and constitutional boundaries. Unlike many royal figures shaped by modern public relations concerns, Anne had spent decades operating within the rigid traditions established under Queen Elizabeth II. According to insiders, she allegedly viewed ambiguity inside the chain of royal authority as a direct threat to the crown's long-term survival. Her imposing presence reportedly strengthened William's resolve and signalled that the future king was no longer standing alone. But for King Charles, the situation was becoming emotionally devastating. Reports suggest the king found himself completely trapped between two unbearable realities. On one side stood his beloved wife, the woman who had endured years of public hostility beside him, and remained his closest personal confidant during the darkest periods of his life. On the other stood his heir, the future, sovereign tasked with protecting not merely the family, but the entire royal institution itself. According to insiders, Charles allegedly struggled throughout the discussions as emotional loyalty collided with heavy constitutional responsibility. Several reports even suggest moments of visible exhaustion during the meeting, with the immense pressure of illness-family division and institutional instability all converging at once. Meanwhile, according to palace whispers, Queen Camilla's allies reportedly attempted urgent damage control behind the scenes. Senior aides allegedly argued that the controversial proposals under discussion had been heavily misunderstood, insisting their purpose was solely to preserve continuity and operational support during this period of uncertainty. Others warned that escalating this conflict risked creating exactly the kind of public constitutional crisis everyone feared most. Because if news of internal division surrounding Regency, powers and succession authority ever reached the public in full detail, the monarchy could face a truly catastrophic collapse in public confidence during one of its most fragile eras in decades. That warning only intensified the stakes further. According to insiders, several senior constitutional advisers present during portions of the discussions reportedly cautioned that prolonged internal conflict could have consequences far beyond palace politics. The monarchy's absolute greatest strength had always been stability, certainty, and continuity, but now uncertainty was spreading right through the very centre of the institution itself, and William allegedly understood that every moment of hesitation carried risks not only for Charles's reign, but for the generations still waiting to inherit the crown. That source's claim became the emotional turning point of this fierce confrontation. William reportedly shifted the discussion away from personalities entirely and focused instead on young Prince George, the future beyond all of them. According to whispers from those familiar with the meeting, William allegedly argued that every single decision made during King Charles's illness would shape the public legitimacy of George's future reign decades from now. This was no longer about private loyalty or family compromise. It was about protecting the monarchy's future before irreversible damage could take deep root inside the royal institution. And according to multiple insiders, that was ultimately the argument King Charles could not ignore. Reports suggest the king reluctantly agreed to scale back or halt portions of the discussions that had caused such alarm within William's camp. But even if the immediate constitutional battle had been successfully contained, insiders claim the emotional consequences inside the royal family were far from resolved. But even after this intense confrontation ended, palace insiders claim the deep damage had already changed the British monarchy forever. What followed was not an open royal feud, but something far more dangerous, a silent institutional war fought through schedules, access advisors, and influence. According to palace insiders, the days following that Sandringham confrontation were marked not by dramatic public clashes, but by something colder, quieter, and infinitely more strategic. There were absolutely no explosive statements, no visible family breakdowns, and no dramatic resignations. The monarchy understood all too well the brutal damage public fighting could inflict during a time already overshadowed by growing fear surrounding the king's health. Instead, this toxic feud vanished behind thick walls of royal protocol, where the real wars were waged not in the media, but through silent, quiet power struggles deep inside the palace itself. And the changes started right away. Insiders close to the palace claimed that multiple key aides who backed those highly traditional and conservative constitutional proposals were quietly pushed out, sidelined, or completely frozen out of highly sensitive meetings. Even their access pathways reportedly changed without any official explanation, Meetings that used to include these top-level aides were suddenly relocated or wiped from the official digital calendars altogether. According to juicy rumours passing between worried palace staff, it became totally clear that William's team was grabbing operational control behind the scenes with incredible precision, not with brute force but surgically. The Prince of Wales reportedly knew that a direct fight would only make the crisis worse. Instead, sources say he focused on building his own power slowly, quietly and systematically. More targeted media briefings started coming straight out of Kensington Palace. Loyal aides close to William and Kate Middleton allegedly took charge dictating terms between the rival royal households. High-ranking officials who always valued traditional royal rules reportedly took the lead in future planning. And even though the firm tried to spin this as normal business as usual while King Charles recovered from cancer, insiders whisper that the true balance of power was already shifting. By then, almost everyone in the royal loop allegedly saw William not just as the next heir, but as the strong leader keeping the crown steady. Meanwhile, joint public outings became highly scripted stunts for damage, control. According to palace insiders, meetings between Charles, Queen Camilla and Prince William were heavily scripted to show total harmony, even though bitter feuds reportedly raged behind closed doors. Joint events were chosen with extreme caution, and their body language was micro-analysed by nervous aides. Every single outing carried massive symbolic weight because the monarchy realised one terrifying truth. If the public caught wind of how deep the family split really went over succession and control, things would spiral out of anyone's control, but even with the strict lockdown, damaging leaks kept slipping out. Palace reporters were hit with rumours of bitter disagreements, constitutional panic and warring, camps fighting for power behind the scenes. Some gossip was vague and sketchy, but other stories had terrifyingly precise details about secret talks, legal battles and growing feuds and secret alliances between the rival royal camps. According to sources, top courtiers grew deeply alarmed by how fast this gossip was spreading among tabloid reporters, commentators and ex-staffers who knew how the palace worked. And the harder officials tried to bury the stories, the more public curiosity exploded. Behind the Arf, scenes rumours suggest the different royal camps were actively drawing battle lines. Decades-old friendships between top aides allegedly fell apart as loyalty lines, locked in over clash of visions for the monarchy's ultimate survival. Many felt Prince William had to step up to save the crown during a historically vulnerable crisis, yet others worried the future king was launching a silent coup while Charles was still wearing the crown. The atmosphere inside the palace offices reportedly turned ice cold, filled with deep paranoia, extreme caution, and intense backroom plotting masked by polite royal protocol. Caught right in the centre of this storm was King Charles. According to insiders, the sick monarch was absolutely desperate to put on a united front for the public, even though the family was splitting apart right around him. Sources claim Charles knew the crown could never survive another messy public war so soon after the absolute destruction of the Prince Harry and Meghan Markle scandal. Public trust was already paper-thin. Faith in the royals had been shattered over and over, and now, while battling cancer, political stress and complete exhaustion, King Charles allegedly found himself struggling desperately to stop the entire royal house from shattering under these warring factions. But by that point, many courtiers believed the real balance of power had already shifted forever, because while Charles still held the title of king, William was seen by staff aides and the public as the true leader carrying the monarchy through its darkest and most fragile crisis in generations. His control grew not by making demands, but through quiet discipline and the palace's massive reliance on his leadership during this breakdown. Ultimately, this fierce battle was never just about empty titles. It was about who would shape the monarchy's future after Charles is gone. Behind the glittering gold, the waving crowds, and the fake forced smiles, one dark truth looms over the House of Windsor. The next royal era may have already started, long before the actual crown officially changes hands. Despite the palace's heavy PR efforts to show peace, stability, and calm, insiders claim a massive shift has taken place beneath the surface of royal life over the last 2 years. The institution that used to centre completely around King Charles is now shifting its focus away from him and toward the future. And at the heart of that future stands Prince William, not just as the next heir to the throne, but as the saviour who is already carrying the massive emotional and political weight of the crown itself. According to sources close to the royal court, William's dramatic transformation during this nightmare has changed how top advisors, family members, and even regular people look at the future crown. The once hesitant prince, often slammed for being too distant, reportedly emerged from the chaos of Charles's illness with a fierce, cold clarity about the fragile empire he is destined to inherit. Sources claim that constitutional panics, bitter family fights, and secret face-offs forced William to accept a brutal truth much sooner than he ever wanted. The ultimate survival of the royal family might rest on cold, harsh decisions that carry a devastating personal cost. And that tragic toll is most visible in King Charles himself. Shocking reports suggest the monarch is physically shattered by his grueling cancer treatments, even as he desperately forces himself to keep working to maintain the strong appearance of a ruling king. Behind those fake public smiles and heavily edited photos, insiders claim Charles has been crushed by the impossible choice between loving his family and saving the crown. For over 50 years he waited to inherit his mother's throne. Yet now, in the middle of the reign, he prepared his whole life, for he is forced to watch the crown slowly slip away to the younger royals while he struggles just to hold everything together today. Meanwhile, Queen Camilla's position in this unfolding royal drama has become increasingly messy. To many, she is the loyal wife who stood by Charles through decades of public hate and brutal scandals to become queen. But, according to palace sources, the massive drama over her excessive influence during the king's illness may have forever ruined how top members of the firm view her role in the future. The vicious rumours, the constitutional panic, and the bitter backstabbing, whether the public knows it or not, have left deep scars inside the palace that will never fully heal. Because once dark doubts creep in about who has the sick king's ear, those toxic suspicions never truly go away in a system built on centuries of secrets. And yet far beyond the private family tensions and institutional manoeuvring, a much bigger war has quietly emerged over public trust. Palace sources say this has become the real battleground driving every major royal decision behind closed doors. It is not just about saving titles or guarding reputations, but keeping alive deep belief in the monarchy during one of the most unstable eras in modern royal history. The palace understands that the crown only survives if the public believes it stands for selfless duty rather than personal ambition, and royal insiders claim Prince William has built his entire approach around that exact principle, duty over influence. In essence, that phrase, according to commentators, has quietly become the defining philosophy of William's future reign. It is the belief that no single person, no matter how close to the monarch, can ever seem larger than the royal institution itself. And perhaps that is why young George and Charlotte carry such immense symbolic importance within the family's carefully crafted future image. To everyday people, they represent continuity, pure innocence and stability after years of toxic scandal and division. Yet, within palace walls, they reportedly represent something even deeper. The next fragile chapter in the survival saga of the famous House of Windsor, because royal history has shown us repeatedly that monarchies are not destroyed only by violent revolutions or external enemies. Sometimes they are weakened slowly from within by heavy silence, by bitter rivalry, by double loyalties, and by the quiet urge to put personal power above their duty. And according to those closest to the throne, that is the ultimate lesson Prince William intends never to forget. Because inside the tense House of Windsor, history has always belonged not to those chasing power, but to those willing to shield the crown from threats, even from those closest to it. Thanks for watching. Please do not forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next video.